Welcome to Change Management Global Connect. My name is Andrea Olson, and I am so excited to have you with us today. Today, we are going to talk about how behavioral science creates customer success. And, a lot of people have really been interested in this topic. We've had a lot of demand for it, and I am excited to share it with you. A little bit about us. I'm with a consultancy called Pragmatic. We use behavioral science to solve complex business and people challenges. And behavioral science really is just the study of why people make the decisions they do. And what we like to do is help shift mindsets and shape behaviors to achieve the change that you're looking within your organization using things like biases, nudging, experience design. And we do a lot of speaking, training, and of course, problem solving. But today specifically, we're going to talk about behavioral science in the context of change. So we're going to talk about customers and we're going to talk about culture today. And think of customers and culture as intertwined, like this Reaver knot. Think of the red cord as customers and the green cord as culture. Pulling one cord tightens the other, but without both cords, you won't have an effective knot. So there are good cultures and there are bad cultures, and I'm sure that we can all recall a few of the bad ones. But a customer-centric culture isn't simply one because the organization's mission or it's deemed so by leadership, right? You can't just declare that it should be customer-centric. Customer centricity depends on how your organizations define it and actually behave within that organization to embody it. I spoke with a chief executive officer at a leading financial institution who defined customer centricity as putting the customer at the heart of everything we do. But what does that mean exactly? She had no answer to that question. So when it comes to translating a concept into action, you need specificity. And if you have no definition on what customer centricity really is in your organization, you could argue any initiative supports it. So this is what I mean about defining customer centricity. One company well known for its actual customer uncentricity is discount airline Ryanair. And Ryanair is a low budget airline headquartered in Dublin. Tickets are cheap and everything else. Extra luggage or a specific seat on the plane, you have to pay extra for. The company makes a profit which any other airline would be jealous of. Yet the number of passengers who choose to fly with Ryanair continues to rise. Actually, in 2020, profits grew 13% and flight traffic grew to over 149 million flyers, despite rising fuel prices on top of a global pandemic. A survey of 20,000 Ryanair customers in 2018 found that 92% of the customers said they would fly with Ryanair again, and 87% stating they would recommend Ryanair to others, and they were satisfied with their experience. So Ryanair's success can be explained by the strategic choice of their main customer promise, a competitive price. The customer knows what to expect from Ryanair and, just as importantly, what not. And this works. Ryanair may not be particularly kind to their customers. Ryanair may not pamper them, but Ryanair may not surprise them with free extras. But Ryanair may deliver poor customer service, but they excel in clarity at one point: price and price alone. So what is your customer-centric strategy? Do you even have one? I mean, determining what customer centricity means to your organization begins with a clear definition. And one caveat: no organization should pursue the position of being entirely customer-centric. There is a diminishing return, which means that at some point, the marginal benefit of being customer-centric is less than the marginal cost. At that point, seeking to be more customer-centric diminishes organizational and shareholder value. So, however, customer centricity, strategically and thoughtfully architected, has significant value. On average, customer-centric organizations generate an average of 33% more revenue year over year than compared to those who are not. But just because you want to become customer-centric or be more customer-centric doesn't mean you can. There are a few internal and external barriers to look for. And internally, this comes in the form of company gravity. Company gravity, or internal gravitational pull, is the set of contextual factors and behavioral biases that systematically bring employees, voluntarily or involuntarily, back to a company-centric perspective. And this comes at the expense of customer centricity. Whether it concerns their brand, their role, or their career, employee inclinations tend towards selecting the company interests over those of the customer. And a successful customer centricity rocket must be designed to minimize friction with the surrounding atmosphere. But very often, after a few kilometers of an expensive climb, we see the rocket fall back and become victim to company gravity. It's a daily endeavor to address the invisible biases in organizations that constitute company gravity. For this, you need to change culture from within, and that's where behavioral science comes into play. Now, employees are often asked to balance the interests and perspective of both the customer and the company simultaneously. A company may tout and push for innovation, but be unwilling to take risks. Or an organization may state that customer satisfaction is of the utmost importance, yet makes customers jump through extensive hoops and redundancies to accomplish their objective. Now, it's important here to talk about salience. Only what is visible is present in the mind, right? However, the client is often the invisible one to employees and remains an abstraction for many people in the company. The work environment may remind the employee of only the company's internal operations, leaving customers out of sight and out of mind. However, behavioral science can insert the customer's presence into the workplace, whether real or virtual. Between customer verbatims, forums, personas, the nudges used must above all be adapted to the profile of that target customer. So let's talk about some of these biases in depth. And implicit reference points actually guide behaviors. And this is what we call framing. Jargon often locks in a system that puts the customer at a distance. What about a customer called a marketing target or a target audience? That's not a person, right? That's not an individual. Or for example, when an insurance company talks about a claims file, doesn't it forget about the insured? Conversely, talking about a guest rather than a customer is not as an innocent choice in the hospitality business. The choice of words in an internal communication implies the place of the customer and their relationship contract with the employees. Do you talk about the buying experience or the selling ceremony to your salespeople? Words always betray a default orientation. Internal communication, framing, by changing the framework of representations, has the power to change usage. Another bias to keep in mind is the familiarity bias. Repeated exposure creates the illusion of knowledge. We know our customers well, and as we are with them every day, salespeople may say. However, such knowledge is often partial at best and is biased on what customers say, not what they don't say, willingly or not. It is possible to make teams achieve what they don't know through playful challenges involving real customers, as long as the customer does not remain the property or responsibility of a single department. In order to act on the collective customer culture, it is the employee's desire to know more about the person who keeps the company alive, and that must be played upon. So it's important to ask and answer 3 critical questions when architecting your customer centricity strategy. And number 1 is customer objectives. What do customers want to achieve? What are their challenges? And we're going to get into this more later. Number 2 is cultural assets. What are you amazing at? Are your people hiring, promoting, and training operations supporting these talents? Or is there an internal disconnect? And number 3, gaps and misalignments. Does your organization's systems support these cultural assets? For example, if being trusted is something you uphold for customers, do your internal processes allow the same trust for employees? Like an expense system that doesn't allow senior executives to sign off on large expenses. Or your communications. What words are your leaders using to communicate internally? Does this match external communication? How are your words and behaviors reflecting your customers' objectives? How is it embodied by your culture? In addition, there are customer behaviors which can thwart customer centricity efforts as well. Here's just a few. According to behavioral scientists, when people recall an experience, they don't remember every single moment of it, unless the experience was short and traumatic. Instead, they recall a few significant moments vividly and gloss over others. In short, they remember snapshots, not movies. And not surprisingly, people prefer a sequence of experiences that improve over time. So for example, like when gambling, they prefer to lose $10 first and then win 5, rather than win 5 and then lose 10. There is also evidence that people pay attention to the rate of improvement in a sequence, clearly preferring ones that improve faster. And most intriguing, the ending matters enormously. A terrible ending usually dominates a person's recollection of an experience. The next bias is duration effects. And psychologists and cognitive sciences have poured enormous effort into unraveling the mysteries of how people process time. When do they pay attention to the passage of time? And how do they estimate its duration? Since perceptions of time's passage are so subjective, the obvious question is, when does duration matter? Research indicates that unless an activity is much longer or much shorter than expected, people pay little attention to its duration. And there are 2 reasons for this. First, the pleasurable content of the experience and how it's arranged, rather than how long it takes, seems to dominate people's assessments. And second, aside from one-off transactions such as buying a cup of coffee, service encounters are rarely identical in length. So people only have a general reference point for evaluating duration. Their estimates of how long it will take to visit a tax accountant or go to a ball game or have a minor surgery are likely to be fuzzy. The next bias that influences experience and culture are rationalization effects. People desperately want things to make sense. And if there's no handy explanation for an unexpected event, they'll concoct one. Behavioral scientists call this counterfactual thinking, but it's simpler to call it second guessing. People second guess because they want one clear reason for why something happened. In their mental simulation, they try to capture the specific what ifs. If only X hadn't happened, things would be different. 3 characteristics stand out in this simulation. First, they view the likely cause as a discrete thing, not a conscious intertwined process. For example, people are more likely to blame a missed plane on the backup in the tunnel than on a cluster of events that in conjunction caused their late arrival. People also tend to ascribe credit or blame to individuals, not systems. Even when they clearly see that the computer system caused the hotel bill error, for example, they tend to blame the clerk. They want to put a human face on the problem. One final note about ascribing blame: people are far less apt to search for the guilty if they think they had some control over the process that occurred. The more empowered and engaged they feel, the less angry they are when something goes wrong. So there are 3 behavioral science keys to influencing the customer experience and overall culture. 1 is finish strong, 2 is get bad experiences out early, and number 3 is segment pleasure and combine pain. So here's the question that we always get is, what about technology, right? We're talking about culture, we're talking about the customer experience, and the question is, why don't we just throw some technology at it? And so many organizations believe that technology is the panacea to customer centricity. Services are continuing to move online, and there's definitely a place for technology in your customer centricity strategy. But however, technology is just a tool. And how effectively those tools are designed and utilized will either amplify or diminish that customer experience. So just remember a time when you were caught in an automated phone system cycle, or a website that was difficult to navigate, or an app that simply failed. Technology is simply a way to deliver an experience, but isn't the experience itself. Now, the one thing that's often lost within customer centricity strategies is the customer point of view. And surprisingly little time has been spent examining customer experiences from the customer's point of view. And at the core of behavioral science is the idea that people don't actually know what motivates them. We're all more influenced by our choice environment than we realize. For example, anchoring bias states that people use the first piece of information they see to judge all later information. One of the major pitfalls of market research is that you can't trust what people tell you. Everything they say goes through an internal filter before they share it with the world. And to make matters worse, customers will say one thing and then do the total opposite. But this doesn't mean that customer research and customer insight isn't useful, but it does mean we shouldn't rely solely on customer feedback to shape the customer experience. And this is because David Ogilvy famously said, the trouble with market research is that people don't think how they feel, they don't say what they think, and they don't do what they say. And we've all experienced that in some point in time. So if this is the case, how do we discover what customers want and need, right? How do we create a customer-centric organization driven by these needs? And just like sliced bread, it's about digging into problems and challenges that they can't see. And this starts with customer conversations and observations. Discovering hidden customer needs is about discovering what you don't know. Conscious desires are what people can articulate. The subconscious desires are not. Instead, the subconscious veils these untapped desires, which typically relate to how a customer feels about your organization and feels about an experience. And the key to growth is meeting the needs of your customers and markets, even the ones they didn't tell you about, or the ones that they're not even aware of. Addressing these hidden unmet needs facilitates remarkable growth. And basing your actions on incomplete or outdated research that does not reveal the actual motivations for customer purchases does not get you the results you need. So there are 3 parts to an approach to understanding and uncovering hidden customer needs. And number 1 is perspective. It is not about a customer experience, but how customers perceive it. Instead of diving to a line of questioning about your performance and ask them about their experiences, explore how their experiences made them feel, how they view your brand, processes, communications, products, and services from their perspective. Don't discuss what solutions you have, nor how they can go about solving their problems, but listen to how they perceive your organization, even if it doesn't align with what you believe is reality. Number 2 is behaviors. What customers say they'll do, as we know, doesn't always align with what they'll actually do. And customers are terrible predictors of their own behavior. And so instead of asking them what they think and feel about something, observe them in action and how they handle a specific challenge or situation that relates to your offering. Ask probing questions, ask why, ask how. And number 3 is context. Customers have a hard time visualizing their needs out of context. Ensure conversations and interactions put the customer in active context of their challenge or need. For example, if you're looking to understand how they choose a mortgage, explore what life change or context triggers it. Discuss what needs surround that context. This will uncover a myriad of ways to serve customers in ways they had never before considered. And there's a specific question architecture you can use for any customer interviews in my upcoming book, What to Ask, releasing June 14th, 2022. So here's some final thoughts for everybody. I know I covered a breadth of things. This was like a fire hose to the face, but I do want to sum up with just some kind of simple takeaways, right? Stated values mean nothing if they conflict with your organizational objectives. And stated beliefs mean nothing if they aren't embodied in your organizational behaviors. And it becomes disingenuous and creates misalignment with your brand, culture, and customers. So it's not just about what you say. It's not about what you proclaim. It's how you act and behave as an organization to start the journey of customer centricity. So I know that this is a pre-recorded session. So if you do have questions from this, don't hesitate to reach out to me by phone, text, Twitter. You can also reach me through these two websites as well. And of course, that book I mentioned, you can snap that QR code and pre-order that, coming out on June 2022. And it's also on the Global Connect bookstore. So thank you very much for listening and appreciate your time. Enjoy your day.